The House will come to order. The pledge today will be led by Cassidy Halsey, Coyote Ridge Elementary, and Keller Halsey Homeschool, Broomfield, Colorado, along with Representative Primavera and their mother, Jennifer Halsey.
Please join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Kohler, please call the roll.
Representatives Arndt. Becker J. Becker K. Brown. Buck. Buckner. Carver. Conti. Corum. Court. Danielson. Del Grosso. Dorr. Duran. Esgar. Everett.
Representative Everett excused.
Fields. Foote. Garnett. Janal. Hamner. Humphrey. Joshi. Kagan. Klingenschmidt. Kraftarp. Landgraf. Lawrence. Lebsock. I got you. Representative Lebsock. Lee. Leonard. Lontine. Lundeen. McCann. Melton. Mitch Bush. Moreno. Navarro. Neville. Nordberg. Pabon. Pedersen. Primavera. Priola. Rankin. Ransom. Rosenthal. Rupe. Ryden. Sane. Salazar. Sias. Singer. Thurlow. Tyler. Van Winkle. Vigil. Willett. Williams. Wilson. Windholes. Winter. Representative Winter. Oh, is she?
No.
Oh.
The speaker is all the way at the
Oh.
back.
Second or third in command. I'm going to get Speaker Pro Tem. Representative Winter excused. Wist. Young. Madam Speaker.
Just wait. Would you get up there, Jenny? Take over.
Announcements and introductions.
This is your chance. Get up there and take over because I've got to read this.
What is it, hon?
The dispense with the minutes thing.
Oh, right. Oh, and introduce my guest. My mommy's here. She's like, I'll stay half an hour. She don't like to sit down.
I don't blame her.
Okay, easy girl. You didn't have to go. No.
Representative Winter is present.
With 64 present, 1 excused, a quorum is present. Representative Thurlow.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the reading of the Journal of Friday, April 1st, 2016 be dispensed with and that it be approved as corrected by the Chief Clerk.
You have heard the motion that the journal be adopted as corrected by the chief clerk. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Announcements and introductions. Representative Arndt and then Representative Ryden.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's my pleasure to announce that my mother is in the chamber today, Libby James. I think I've talked about her before on Women's History Month. And we also have 2 outstanding young ladies who are exchange students from Sweden, so join me in welcoming them to the chamber.
Members, we're in announcements and introductions. Please take your side conversations to the side and place your attention to the well. Representative Ryden.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, we do have a full calendar today. We will be meeting in room 271. We will have House Bill 1300, Senate Bill 74, Senate Bill 70, House Bill 1235, and House Bill 1200. So we'll see you there at 1:30. Thank you.
Representative Primavera.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. For members of Public Health Care and Human Services, we will not be hearing House Bill 1383 tomorrow, and we will be meeting on Friday.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I just want to remind everybody of the Bible study tomorrow morning and breakfast downstairs, and we'd love to have you all come down there. Thank you.
Are there further announcements and introductions? Seeing none, the next order of business is House Bill 1396. Representatives, please take your seat. And Mr. Kohler, Representative Lebsack. Okay. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1396.
House Bill 1396 by Representative Lebsack, also Senator Hodge, concerning changing outdated references to aliens in the Colorado Revised Statutes with respect to Colorado programs.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move for the passage of House Bill 1396 on third reading and final passage.
The question is the passage of House Bill 1396 on third reading and final passage. Representative Lebsack.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members, words do matter, and words matter in our Colorado Revised Statutes. And so the only thing that this bill does is removes outdated language and inserts language that is more appropriate in our Colorado Revised Statutes. If you look at page 5 of the bill, it speaks to defects. We should never, ever refer to an individual's either mental or physical disabilities as a defect. We shouldn't refer to an individual who has a mental or physical disability as defective. And so that's one of the things that this bill does. The second thing that this bill does is removes the word alien and inserts language that is more appropriate. We should be referring to human beings as immigrants and as foreign nationals, not as aliens. And so I ask the members of the House and thank the Judiciary Committee for fully vetting this bill, and I appreciate a yes vote today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Is there further discussion on House Bill 1396? Seeing none, Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 46 ayes, 19 noes, and 0 excused, House Bill 1396 is passed. Co-sponsors. The next order of business is second reading of bills. Representative Mitch Bush.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the House now resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole for reading of general orders.
You heard the motion. Seeing no objection, Representative Mitch Bush will take the chair.
Please come to order. With your unanimous consent, the bills will be read by title unless there's a request for reading a bill at length. Committee amendments will not be read unless requested, as they're printed and in your bill folders. Floor amendments will be shown on the screen and on your iPads and not read unless requested. Bills will be laid over upon the motion of the Majority Leader, and the Cote rule is relaxed. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1355.
House Bill 1355 by Representatives Foote and Ryden, also Senators Ulibarri and Jones, concerning the ability of local governments to exercise land use authority over oil and gas facilities used in oil and gas operations in a manner analogous to the sitting of other industrial facilities.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1355 in the State Military and Veterans Affairs Committee report.
To the committee report, please. Representative Foote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The committee report members in this bill, we ended up amending out a couple sections. It was section 2 and 3 of the bill, I believe, that dealt with the House Bill 1041 powers. We decided that we didn't really want to go there after all, after hearing from folks. And so we amended that out and we changed the wording of citing to location. And that constituted the entire State Affairs Committee report.
Representative Kraft-Tharp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L008 and ask that it be shown on the screen.
Amendment L008 to House Bill 1355 is properly displayed. Please proceed. Representative Kraft-Tharp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. So I bring you L008. I really want to thank Representative Foote and Representative Wrighton for bringing this issue for conversation. This oil and gas is a personal issue to so many people here in our state right now. Unfortunately, it has become a very polarized issue. And so my intention with L008 is to move us away from the polarization and to be able to find that balance between the state interests and also the local interests. So this L008 does three things. First, it strikes the legislative declaration because it would no longer fit. Second, it talks about that oil and gas facilities, that local areas would have control over oil and gas facilities with regard to their noise, visual, and traffic impacts. Third, it carries forth from the original committee report around not repealing the sections in 1041. So I ask for your support. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L008? Representative Wist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question, Representative Kraft-Tharp, is could the effect of the amendment mean to stop permitting entirely? Or is this discretionary in terms of the granting of any permit by a local governmental authority?
Representative Kraft-Tharp.
Thank you. So I think without a legal analysis, it would be difficult for me to say absolutely. What this does, either way, what this does is this shifts the bill from a location authority to a noise, traffic, and visual authority.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, we consider this to be a friendly amendment. And to answer Representative Wist's issue a little bit, this bill has always been about reaffirming certain areas of local control. There's a debate about that amongst some, and we are reaffirming certain areas of local control. We're not taking any away. And this bill has never been about prohibiting oil and gas operations. That was made clear in the committee where you were, Representative Wist, and we're making it clear on the floor. It's not about whether, it's about the means by which mineral extraction occurs. Now, I know that there's industry opponents that are putting this out there, that it's about prohibiting fracking, and I'll just say here, that's just not true. It's just simply untrue. So this amendment, what it does is that it reaffirms that local governments have the authority to regulate noise, visual impacts, and traffic. Now, it has nothing to do with the other areas that local authorities have the authority to regulate. That is completely outside of the scope of this bill. But we are specifically reaffirming these three areas, and these three areas only, without taking away any local authority about any other area that deals with local control of oil and gas, or any other industry for that matter. It's just these three areas that we're reaffirming, because the problem has been, as we heard in the committee, that the industry decides if they don't get the conditions that they want for drilling, then they threaten a lawsuit or they go ahead and sue the local governments. We want to take away that litigation hammer that they use against local governments in these three specific areas. This bill is silent on all the other areas. There is no intent to deal with any of the other areas. Our intent is simply to reaffirm local control and local regulations in these three specific areas.
Representative Willett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. I don't mean to imply at all that the intent of the representatives would be to have basic veto power or banning power. but my law firm happens to be involved in a couple of lawsuits in Delta County on issues of farming and chicken farming in particular. And what happens is, as a practical matter, when the bureaucrats and the regulators and the system wants to stop something, they do so by repeated requirements, and then that requirement's not met, and so they up the bar or move the goalposts again. So I think it's a very legitimate concern of the oil and gas industry that the practical effect will be if a community wants to ban or veto something based on noise, dust, visual impacts, it can and will do so, particularly with narrow profit margins. Thank you.
Representative Kraft Tharp.
Thank you, Representative Willett, and I appreciate that. And and I'll tell you that that is something that I have thought about, that I am concerned about. Let me say, for the official record, it is not my intent to provide a measure for the locals to be able to ban oil and gas activity based upon those 3 areas. That is not my intent, to be able to open that up. My intent is that this is a polarized issue, and we need to start the conversation around both state interests and local interests. And in my mind, the local areas have expertise and should be able to utilize that expertise in the conversations around noise, around the visual effects, and around the traffic effects. My intent is that we start to carve out some reasonable paths to be able to establish that balance between state interests and local control.
Representative Wist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bill originally started as a discussion about whether local governments could make siting or location decisions. So I guess if this is being received as a friendly amendment, my question for the sponsors is, are siting and location decisions now off the table? Are we agreeing that this is only about local government's ability to regulate noise, visual, and traffic impacts?
Representative Rodden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to stress to you all that if you will look at the title, it says reaffirming. This is authority that already exists. There has been a lot of discussion about whether it exists or not, but it does. And what we are doing here today with this amendment is focusing on areas of greatest concern, and that would be noise, lighting, and traffic, and reaffirming that our local governments do have the authority to make rules around those areas. We have not addressed specifically any other issues with this amendment. It doesn't mean that the local authority that already exists goes away in any way. This simply focuses on 3 areas that are of major concern.
Representative Wist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So members, I just want to go over what local governments already have the authority to do, and this is under COGCC Rule 603.H2. Local governments can already do the following, and it's an extensive list. Maintain independent land use permitting processes. Require building permits for above-ground structures, truck traffic and access roads, road impact fees, emergency response and fire protection plans, new building setbacks from existing wells, inspection for compliance with local codes, performance standards related to water quality, wildlife impacts, soil erosion, wildlife and vegetation. Define what constitutes a flood plan and thereby prohibit placement of E&P waste pits. So our Conservation Commission, and with compliments to our governor, who has shown great leadership on this, the Commission has already spoken in this area. I see no need for this amendment. It adds nothing new to the equation. This is authority local governments already have, and I would urge a no vote on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L008? Representative Foote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, It is true, local governments do have a lot of authority, and local governments definitely try to take advantage of that. But the problem is when they try to take advantage of the authority they already have, they get sued or they get threatened to be sued by the industry. This is why we're running a bill to reaffirm the authority they have in these 3 specific areas and not in any way say that they don't have authority in the areas that Representative Wiss just mentioned. And if that is the case, that they already have this authority and this doesn't do anything, then we shouldn't really have any debate about this bill. If we agree on that, then we should just pass the bill and be done with it for the day.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd just like to ask Representative Foote why we need to run a bill that reaffirms what's already in state statute. Why do we need to have that kind of bill? Why do we need to reaffirm, expand government, expand the law to reaffirm what local governments already have? I've had a lot of experience as a county commissioner with oil and gas. And why do we need to do that? I don't understand that.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Brown, to answer your question, it's not an expansion, it's a reaffirmation. So those are 2 different concepts. But I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why, because there are a number of communities around this state, and particularly along the Front Range, that are trying to listen to their constituents' concerns about what's happening in their neighborhoods. And not just in my district, although it is happening in my district. 2/3 of my district at one point was being sued by the oil and gas industry. And there's others that have been around the Front Range that have been threatened to be sued if they don't give in to what the industry wants them to do. And those areas that they're trying to regulate include these 3 areas, as well as many others. And so because these are the 3 areas that a lot of people have been talking about and a lot of constituents for these local governments talk about, we want to make sure that we, again, reaffirm in those areas that they have the ability to make regulations along those areas, to make sure that their constituents' concerns are heard, because right now they are not being heard. The industry comes in, the industry says we're going to do it this way or else we're going to sue you. Many local governments say, well, we can't really afford that. We don't have much of a tax base. We're going to have to go along with what you said. And so that's what they do. We don't think that's playing together well. We don't think that's fair. We don't think that's right to local governments. And so we want to make sure that the local governments and their constituents have the ability to have a meaningful say in what's happening in their backyard, particularly when it comes to these 3 specific areas.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L008 to House Bill 1355? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of Amendment L008. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. L008 passes. To the committee report, please. Representative Foote.
Is this to the bill, Madam Chair? No, that would just pass the amendment. Right,
to the bill.
To the committee report. No. It's struck the committee report? Okay, sorry about the confusion, Madam Chair. We are back to the bill. We're to the bill. Okay. We are to the bill, House Bill 1355. So members, I want to give you a little background about where I'm coming from on this bill. And I know that Representative Ryden shares similar sentiments because she's been working on this issue as I have for several years. So I started really thinking about this bill in earnest last year during the session after the Governor's Task Force came out with 9 recommendations, of which do very little, particularly to deal with this main issue about local control and whether or not constituents in the localities have a say, a meaningful say in what happens in their backyards. And amazingly, around that time, I heard a number of commercials coming from an oil and gas industry front group that was talking about how great the industry is doing and how much they want to cooperate with local governments. The commercials say something like, actually I'm going to quote here, "We are doing things right." And another quote says, "Cities and counties already have the authority to work with companies to tailor operations to meet local concerns." So that's what the commercial said. So I thought, well, we know what the rhetoric is, so why don't we just match the rhetoric with the reality? Because, you know, if you're connected into these Front Range communities, like Larimer County, like Adams County, like Boulder County, like Arapahoe County, and others along the Front Range, you know that that's actually not the reality. The reality is, as I've explained before, that the industry comes in and decides that it's going to do something, and there may be a memorandum of understanding that's cut with the local governments. Of course, you can say whether or not that's a fair process. But otherwise, if they don't get what they want, then they decide that they're going to threaten to sue, or in fact, do sue those local governments. So I thought, why don't we just go ahead and say, okay, if that's what the industry front group is saying, that they're doing it right and they already have the authority, the local governments that is, to work with companies to tailor operations to meet the local concerns, why don't we do that? And the bill as amended actually does do that. It does it in a way in these 3 specific areas that deal with traffic concerns, which are very big concerns for people in these neighborhoods. Think about it, if there's an oil and gas heavy industrial operation that's put down in the middle of a neighborhood of, say, 20 to 30 houses, and you have the large amount of truck traffic that goes through these neighborhoods day in and day out, sometimes more than just day in and day out. The local residents are concerned about that, and we want to make sure that the local governments can have a say-so in what happens there. And we're reaffirming the existing authority in that area so that the industry can't go down the road that they have been and threaten to sue if they don't get their way in this area. Also, it talks about noise impacts and visual impacts, which are, again, areas that the local residents have a lot of concern about, particularly during the first part of the drilling operation, which can go 24 hours a day. And they were very concerned about noise. They're very concerned about visual, lighting in particular, of what happens next to them, because these can be about anywhere between 500 to 750 feet away from somebody's house under our current rules. And so they have a right to be concerned about that, and they want to go to their local governments, and they want to be able to have their say. They want to be able to talk about what happens, and they want the local governments to be able to make a decision, particularly in these 3 areas. So this bill, in short, reaffirms that the local governments have the authority to do so. It reaffirms the authority of local governments to have a meaningful say and actually lay down the rules when it comes to noise, traffic, and visual, just like they can for every other industry in the state. It takes away the oil and gas special exemption that they have in the statute in many different places in these 3 specific areas, and says that local governments can listen to their members' concerns, their constituents' concerns, and they can do something about it. So we ask for an aye vote on the bill.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Rudden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the co-prime sponsor on this bill, I just want to give you a little bit of my background in this issue. I became involved pretty seriously in about 2010 when we first started hearing that there was going to be oil and gas development close to our easternmost neighborhoods in Aurora. My constituents brought this issue to me, and they were concerned about a lot of things, including their health and safety and their property values. So in 2013, I ran a bill that would, again, affirm the local authority in these matters, and that bill failed. In 2014, we came very close to a legislative resolution of this and other issues before that discussion was not successful, and then the governor set up the task force. Frankly, the task force, spent a lot of time going over these same issues. It's a very complex subject. It's not something that you can learn in just a couple of 2-hour sessions of hearing from people. It's taken me 6 years to really get a grasp of the issues, and even then, as new things happen every year, you have to learn about the new technologies, the new possibilities, and what the new options might be. So this is a continually growing and changing issue. And what I noticed at our hearing before the State Affairs Committee this time was the contrast between the folks that came to testify in 2013. I had a small group of people. There were some activist kinds of folks, and there were a few other people, but I don't recall a whole lot of support from local elected officials. And this time, I think we had 20 or 25 local elected officials who signed up to testify. And it showed that this is an impact that is getting larger, not smaller. And as these operations come right into communities within just a few hundred feet of homes and schools, people are really getting very upset and concerned, and they don't feel as if there's any recourse, especially when their local elected officials say, well, if we try to do that, we're going to get sued, and we can't afford such a lawsuit. And I think if you think about yourself when you've moved into your new home, I think you probably expected that you would be in an area where your community would have zoned so that it would be residential. Maybe you would have a little bit of retail in there. I don't think you were expecting that you would be next to a major industrial site, or that one could move in after you have moved in and put your entire life savings into your home. And it's the biggest investment for almost all of us, I would say. And so when folks find out that their local government feels that they don't have the ability to go ahead and have rules around these sorts of facilities, and not because they don't have the authority, but because if they try to use their authority, they're going to get sued, you can imagine how upset these folks get. In fact, I have a number of constituents that I've been working with over the last 5 or 6 years, and they're carrying ballot petitions now. They have a ballot measure that goes much farther than this bill. This bill is just a very modest reaffirmation of authorities that already exist. The ballot measure will do a lot more, and I have been trying to convince my constituents that we can come up with a legislative resolution, and that's what I'm hoping that you will all agree that we can do this year. And I think that would go a long way toward helping them have trust in us once again, that we can get things done, we can compromise, and we can make folks' lives better. So I urge your support for House Bill 1355.
Is there further discussion on House Bill 1355? Representative Wist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I just want to be really clear about one thing, and that is that a yes vote for this bill is a statement that our governor's policy has failed us. It is a statement against the collaborative and joint mission that we have all been on, and frankly, the bipartisan mission that we have all been on to support and work with the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. So I want to make sure that that's clear, that this is a statement that the governor's policy has failed, and I think certainly I would hope that we wouldn't get to that point. Now let's talk about what this bill does do and what it does not do. Yes, local governments have the authority to regulate oil and gas. We don't disagree with that. We don't dispute that. The reason for litigation, speaking directly to Representative Foot's concern about the litigation hammer, is that when local governmental authorities exceed the authority that they have in statute with respect to siting decisions that are directly preempted by the statutory authority that exists in the COGCC, that's what results in litigation. And in fact, members, there are currently 2 cases currently pending before the state Supreme Court that speak directly to the jurisdiction issue. Now I ask you, does it make any sense? Does it make any sense at all for us as a legislative body to be making pronouncements on jurisdiction issues when these are legal issues that the justices across the street are currently considering? Imagine the scenario that we will have if we pass this bill and the Supreme Court issues decisions that are contrary to what the legislature is now saying. Imagine the confusion that will result. Imagine if you're a regulated entity, what specifically are you to do? And specifically to your point about local governmental authority, what will local governmental entities do when faced with mixed messages from the legislature and the Colorado Supreme Court? 2 equal bodies of government, okay? So I think we have to recognize the uncertainty that we inject into this entire process by passing this bill. There is no question that local governments have broad authorities, and these general powers have never been applied in the case to prevail over the COGCC's precise enabling legislation and specific powers to, among other things, to, among other things, cite wells. So this members, is not about local governmental authority. This is about allowing local governmental entities to preempt the state OGCC to make siting decisions. Don't be tricked and don't be fooled into thinking that these are just minor decisions with respect to traffic, minor decisions with respect to noise. What this bill seeks to do is to preempt state action on oil and gas siting. Now, this has been well settled for a long time. Siting decisions are expressly enumerated in the Oil and Gas Act. We resolved this issue a long time ago when we determined that the extraction of oil and gas resources were a matter of statewide concern. And I expect today in this debate we'll hear questions about, well, why is oil and gas different? And there are certainly many reasons why it's different. This has been briefed extensively, but you should know that oil and gas production is not always amenable to the geographic boundaries of a county. So let's say a county decides to make a siting decision to put that well to the boundary of the county, thereby affecting the neighboring county. This is not really an issue that one local government can do without impacting another local government. That's why this is an issue of statewide concern. That's why this has been a settled issue of law for decades. Seeking to upset the apple cart now and to abandon the course that we've all taken together in terms of looking at a collaborative and bipartisan approach to this issue really is sort of throwing out the baby with the bathwater. So I suggest to you, members, let's stay the course. Let's use the approach that the governor has outlined. Let's continue to support the authority of the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. Let's be reasonable, let's be prudent, and let's certainly not do anything rash that will harm this very important industry to our state. I urge a no vote on the bill.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The statement was said, or the term was used, upset the apple cart. I think the apple cart was upset once oil and gas started to plan their operations in the middle of communities, in the middle of suburbia. That's when the apple cart was upset. We're not talking about platforms that are acres or miles away from a home or from a school or from other places that people frequent. We're talking within 500 feet of a person's house. A house that a person worked for, that they invested their time and money into. That's when the apple cart was upset. And you might want to take a look at the oil and gas industry at upsetting that apple cart when they make those decisions. I come from a county that has 65% of it slated to be fracked. And we have a much larger population center than some of our neighboring counties that have neighbors that might be a mile away from each other. We have constituents that have well water still that will be affected because of these fracking operations. We have individuals who are concerned about whether our fire departments have the capability to handle a disaster. And don't say it doesn't happen, it just happened 3 weeks ago. And it happened last year. And a report came out that said 615 wells resulted in contamination. 15% of it was groundwater contamination. Let's not kid ourselves in believing that it doesn't happen. This bill, this reaffirmation, is important for our local governments who are constantly under the threat of the oil and gas litigation hammer. And we know how people here don't like litigation so much, but it seems like you turn a blind eye when it comes to oil and gas. And that's what my county is worried about. That's why you see my county on here. That's why you see my city on here, is because they're always constantly under threat. Now, I have some operations that are slated to go right underneath my district, right underneath the high school and right underneath the middle school. It's all very transparent. We've talked about it in our community meetings. And our local elected officials, county officials, and our city officials have asked for the latitude to be able to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its residents. You mentioned that this law was settled decades ago. Yes, it was settled decades ago when it was occurring in remote areas. Decades have passed, and remote areas are now suburban areas. And that's why this bill is important, is because it addresses what's happening today, not what happened decades ago. It's addressing the concerns and the fear and the safety and the welfare of our residents today, not decades ago. I think it's about time that we start being more forward-thinking in this body instead of looking back in the past. I support this bill.
Representative Casey Becker.
Thank you, members. I come down to address an aspect of this bill and of the whole fracking debate that I hear over and over and just gets the law wrong. Over and over I hear if local governments have the authority, any authority, to regulate oil and gas, then that somehow is going to be a takings. Let's be clear, members. The Supreme Court has been very clear on what constitutes a takings since the 1992 case, Lucas versus South Carolina Coastal Council. In that decision, the Supreme Court laid out the takings analysis. Property can be regulated by a local government, by a state government, by federal government, but if it goes too far, there can be a takings. The regulation goes too far if it denies an owner all economically beneficial use, leaving one's property, quote, economically idle. Regulations regarding noise, regarding traffic, regarding smells do not leave that property economically idle. They do not take away all economically beneficial use of property. This bill, either in its amended form or in its original form, or other local government authority to regulate local control over oil and gas, is not a takings. That's just plain wrong, and people who are saying that are trying to mislead you about the law. If it's a takings, it would have to deprive all economically viable use of the land. This is not a takings, folks. Don't buy into that argument. I ask for an aye vote.
Representative Humphrey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to address the issue with of the property values. It's been said numerous times that property values are threatened or will be wiped out because of gas and oil operations in the area. And of course, those are temporary situations while the actual drilling is going on. And in Weld County, where I live, you can hardly spin in a circle and not see some sort of gas and oil site in the area, and property values are strong. It's just not happening. It's a very robust housing market, so important to remember.
Representative Wist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, so you may ask, how did we get to this point? Did we completely exclude local governments from this conversation? And the answer is absolutely not. So we have a number of counties that have worked very well within the existing process. There are memoranda of understanding that have been executed in numerous counties. And what we're not debating is local government authority to regulate the industry. They have the authority. Clearly, they have the authority. We acknowledge that. Where we differ, members, is the utilization of that authority to ban drilling. Authority that they expressly do not have, a decision that's specifically preempted by state law. That's the reason why there are 2 cases pending in the Supreme Court on that subject. Well, let's talk about the local government participation that's currently embraced in our process. We have local government designees. We have local government liaisons. They are the central primary contact point between the COGCC and local governments. This is the first of its kind in the country. This was instituted in 1992. The LGL program was added in 2012. 160 local governments currently participate in this process. Does that sound like a broken process to you? It's working. These local government designees have specific rights and opportunities to participate in permitting, enforcement, and other processes. These folks attend public meetings, local government hearings. They facilitate communication. I don't want to go on and on and on, but we have so much in our current system that empowers, that entitles local governments to participate, that allows local citizens who are affected by oil and gas extraction to participate in that process. And why would we simply throw all of that out? Is it because it's not working? I suggest that this is actually a narrowly driven bill for a narrow group of interests that are seeking to hijack this issue that has worked very, very well for us on a statewide level. And the memoranda of understanding have been broadly adopted. Local governmental authorities have had negotiating authority to work with the COGCC and operators to negotiate terms at arm's length. So members, when I say don't upset the apple cart, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about don't throw out a process that's working. Don't abandon the course that has served us well. I ask for a no vote.
Representative Winter.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I urge that you support this bill. This is not about bans and moratoriums. This is a simple, common sense solution that clarifies what local governments can and cannot do. Local governments are not empowered in this process right now. They are not empowered because it is a patchwork of MOUs. Currently, Adams County is threatened to be sued for asking for the exact same thing that Arapahoe County got in their MOUs. I spent 7 years on city council. Your local officials, your county commissioners, your city councilors spend hours working with the community to make sure that roads are well planned, that traffic is flowing, that schools are placed appropriately with neighborhoods, that industry is put in the right spot. It is unfortunate that every time local government tries to direct oil and gas operations, they get threatened with a lawsuit. By voting for this bill, you are simply issuing a statement that we want clarity around what local governments have the authority to do. You're empowering your local officials, and it's that you believe in local control. We talk about local control in this building all the time. Allowing your local governments to simply have a say over things like traffic, lighting, noise, is a common sense solution that has nothing to do with bans and moratoriums, and I urge an aye vote.
Representative Sane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to speak real quick to what Representative Winter just said. Your local governments have this ability already with traffic, noise, lighting. But the problem is, with the amendment that was added to the bill, you still have citing decisions, and that's what a lot of these local governments are being sued over. It's not because they want to control traffic or lighting. This is about banning. That's why they're getting sued. The government should do three things at a minimum: protect life, liberty, and property rights, and that includes all property rights. So we've got a system in place. Representative Wiss made those points very elegantly, that there's a process in place to protect both. We should leave that process in place. And in fact, if this bill passes, municipalities and counties, this could actually hurt you in the future on the things that were just touched upon for traffic, lighting, and noise. You may actually get less authority if this bill passes because of the confusion and uncertainty it would inject. So I would ask you, maybe you should urge your representatives to vote against this, because this may actually go backwards and give you less authority, and I'm pretty sure your citizens would be more angry with you if that were to happen. So the process in place right now does protect both property rights that people with homes, of people with open spaces, and protects people, across the county, but it also protects the people who own those mineral rights underneath as well. So we should let that process work and go forward. This could actually worsen the conditions for folks in homes that are close to these facilities. Thank you.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to take a moment to address something that Casey Becker, Representative Casey Becker said. She was talking about takings, and she mentioned land, that you're not going to take their land, and that's true. But a ban or regulations that would result in a ban on drilling would be a takings of mineral rights. And in this state, the minerals and the land, the surface, are many times separated. And that is what we are talking about here. Let me tell you, I was a county commissioner, and one thing that we did not have the expertise in as county commissioners was locating where these wells should go so that the mineral owners would be able to have ingress and egress to their property, to be able to get that property, to use that property. And that is something that the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission has expertise in. Counties do not. We need to be very careful. And I want to reiterate the fact that counties do have a lot of authority. We worked through this in the 80s and 90s when I was a county commissioner in making sure that counties had the ability to regulate those things that are very important to counties. But we didn't go so far as to have regulations that would absolutely ban drilling. And that is what we need to be careful of here. I ask that you vote no on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of this. As a former planning and zoning commissioner with the city of Longmont, we can talk about the fact that there aren't experts on those commissions all the time, but there are citizens. There are citizens that have an understanding of how things impact their neighbors. And trust me, if you have an oil and gas, any oil and gas operation coming to your community, the OGCC is going to be there, the drillers are going to be there, the citizens are going to be there, and it's up to the citizens, should be up to the citizens, to be able to make a logical decision based on the facts. That's our process. That's our process. That's what we do every day. None of us are experts in everything that we vote on, but we listen and we make the best decision possible. What this bill does is puts a belt and suspenders around some of those logical, common sense considerations that our planning and zoning commissioners, that our county commissioners, that our city council members are already expected to make for so many other things. And not to beat a dead horse, but last week we were talking about something similar, and the more that we play a zero-sum game on this issue, the more that we block off these logical considerations, the more you're going to see communities like Longmont, communities like Lafayette, communities like Fort Collins stepping up and saying, you know what, if we can't have a reasonable conversation about this, if we can't use logic, we're just going to throw the whole thing out and forget about it. That doesn't help anyone either. So it's time to use a little bit of logic and common sense in saying, if this works for pretty much every other activity, can we put the belt and suspenders here to make sure that these conversations happen in a reasonable fashion with the experts at the table, but with the citizens at the table as well? Please vote yes on House Bill 1355.
Representative Willett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for that, Rep. Singer. That's a really good segue to what I was going to point out. As a matter of reality on this, folks, some of you might have gone on the C3 tour last summer, and we went to the little town of Parachute. And a combination of WPX and Halliburton put in a multi-million multi-pad well site right next to town, right next to the little playground. They work together with the state, with the local authorities, just in the system that we've heard about today. They have an ombudsman group up there in the Grand Valley that represents interests of private property owners, of businesses, of homeowners, to make sure that there's maximum mitigation. It was fantastic what they did. They ran about a half a mile of piping over a hill, so all the big red fracking trucks that you see were in this depressed area in a camp, so the noise was kept down. They built sound barriers, they built walls. This pad was incredible. It had hydraulics, so they'd drill one well and it would move a little. They'd frack that well and drill it, and then they could start production. And they worked, and all the residents were totally satisfied, even those, yes, who didn't have any interest in the subsurface estate. So that's the system we have. That's the way it can be done correctly, with the state having the top of the pyramid, with local input first, and with ombudsmen for the actual citizens. If you haven't been to these sites, please go to the West Slope, where Bill Barrett started this some 50, 60 years ago. See what's been done to satisfy the concerns under this system. We don't need a new system. The concerns are valid about what this bill would do. Learn from the West Slope. Go to Parachute. Talk to WPX. Talk to Halliburton. And you can see how it can be done so well. Thank you.
Representative Willett. I'm sorry, Representative West. So sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Singer, I'm glad you brought up the issue of expertise, because this is one of my primary concerns about this bill, and the increased cost that it will bear, that the taxpayers will bear as a result of it. So I specifically asked this question in committee of numerous local governmental leaders and asked them who had the expertise within that local government to make these complex decisions regarding well siting. And the answer in each and every instance was that the local governments would need to hire experts at taxpayer expense to advise those local governments on these decisions. That's because included in these decisions, and just to bring us back to what this is not about truck patterns or noise. This is about siting decisions. That language remains in the bill. The location of wells is what this bill seeks to have deposited in the authority of local governments. Memorandum of understandings have addressed these issues. Here are some of the complex issues that are in MOUs. Best management practices, emergency preparedness plans, pit standards including setbacks, county and operator meetings, air and water quality sampling, traffic requirements, provisions for plugging specific wells certain time periods. This is the expertise that already resides today within the COGCC. Why would we pass a law saying that local governments should hire outside experts at taxpayer expense to do something that our Oil and Gas Conservation Commission already does? So who are these radical governments that have executed these MOUs? Well, I can tell you that there is an extensive list. Arapahoe County, City and County of Broomfield, Commerce City, Elbert County, the Town of Erie, the City of Fort Collins, the Town of Hudson, the City of Longmont, La Plata County, Greeley. These are local governments that have worked within the existing system to sign MOUs. So I'd suggest, where is the broken system? Where is the need for this law? Please vote no.
Representative Salazar, I believe you were next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And before I provide a response, I do want to pull up the visual of what Representative Willett had mentioned about Parachute and about these fracking operations happening next to playgrounds. I suppose if it's good for a community to use the oil rig as monkey bars, then that might be one thing, or maybe have a fracking fluid water slide. I guess that would be up to them. But that's not what we're talking about. And we're not talking about Parachute, we're talking about Thornton, Colorado, population quite a bit. And what they're concerned about is they're concerned about how these operations are being placed right in the middle of the community. They don't want them there. And no, it's not a temporary drive down in their home values. It's long-standing. And just think about that for a second. Oh, no, you should just stomach having a temporary decline in your property values. You should just stomach that for a little while. Is that what this body does? Is that what we tell people? That they should stomach a loss in their property values, the things that they work on for so long? And just tolerate the fact that they're going to have all this noise going on in their neighborhoods? Not to mention the smells, not to mention all of the traffic, where there are thousands of people, not hundreds of people, thousands. And that's why I said, what was happening decades ago was when we had less of a population. We are in 2016, where we've increased our population at least double from the 1990s, with suburban areas creeping into what used to be considered rural areas. That's why this bill is important, because it's looking at what's happening today and moving forward. Now, someone mentioned the comment, well, this bill must mean that it's a governor's fail. It's not a governor's fail. It's the fact that we recognize that the task force is incomplete in its job, that we are listening to our constituents, the many thousands of them in urban areas. I invite you to come into my district, just as much as I've invited the governor to come into my district. You will hear from Republicans, independents, and Democrats alike, and Green Party, Constitutional Party, you name it. You will hear from them that they don't like this in the district. And that's why this bill is important in the reaffirmation. No, we don't want drilling rigs next to playgrounds. That might be fine in your district. It is not fine in ours.
Representative Lebsack.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wanted to address a couple of Representative Wist's concerns. He mentioned that he had concerns about the siting. The amendment that we passed, L008, removes the language of siting from the bill. And so essentially the bill is silent on that issue. What the bill does now with the amended version, as we just amended it on second reading, is speaking to traffic, noise, and lighting. And that's something that local governments do every day, members. Every single day at a city council meeting, for example, or a meeting of your county commissioners, they rule on issues of traffic, noise, and lighting. This is not groundbreaking here, what we're doing. Essentially, what we're doing is reaffirming current state law. Local government should have this authority. This is a strong local control state. We need to make sure that we reaffirm that this is a strong local control state and not do away with the powers that local governments have. So just to reiterate, the bill now is silent on the siting issue. We're only talking about traffic, noise, and lighting. And members, who better to discuss and negotiate with oil and gas companies than our local governments? Our local government should be concerned about truck traffic and on our roadways, because you're the ones that are paying for those roadways. Members, this is a very moderate. This bill has been amended to the point where it's very moderate and very thoughtful and reaffirms our local government's local control to traffic, noise, and lighting. And I urge a yes vote on House Bill 1355.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Lebsack, for that explanation. I think you actually put it better than I did about what we're dealing with here, particularly on the amended bill. I want to address a couple of things because this has come up during the debate. One thing that we heard is this is just a way to ban fracking. Well, I'm interested in where you're getting that. I know that's what the industry is saying because that's what they say all the time when something like this comes up, but I'm interested because it's our bill, Representative Ryan and I, it's our bill, so we're very familiar with what's in the bill. So I would like to hear from somebody coming up and pointing to language that's in the amended bill in particular, since that's what we're dealing with now, that would talk about why this is or could lead to a fracking ban. The argument just holds no water. It's what the industry says, no doubt about that, but it's just not true. Now, speaking of fracking bans, though, that is the issue that's in front of the Supreme Court right now. The Longmont fracking ban that was put in place by the voters because a big reason why they put that into place is because the Longmont City Council put forth some very reasonable regulations in 2012, and guess what? They got sued. And so folks in Longmont said, well, if you're going to sue us about this, then why don't we just ban it? And they passed that by a 60-40 margin in Longmont in 2012 as a result of what happened. But that is what's before the Supreme Court now, right now, is whether or not a locality can ban fracking. The companion case is the Fort Collins case, whether or not a 5-year moratorium is tantamount to a ban. That's the issue before the Supreme Court. Now, there's a couple of other issues that the parties were asked to brief and that they were asked to argue at the oral arguments in December. Many of those involved things like whether or not there should have been summary judgment that was granted by the district court, whether or not evidence should have been considered here and not considered there, so procedural issues. And those are also before the court. But whether or not the local government can regulate noise, traffic, and lighting is so far beyond what the Supreme Court is considering right now, it's not even really worth mentioning. And that's also because we know, and we're just reaffirming in this bill, that noise and lighting and visual impacts are things that local governments can deal with now anyway. As Representative Lebsack said, he dealt with them as a member of City Council for years. And that's because city councils and county commissions, this is their job. Their job is to deal with land use issues. They do it every single day. And not just the elected bodies, but also the planning commissions and people that report to them from staff. This is what they do. So one criticism that was brought up was, well, I guess the city councils and county commissions don't have this expertise to do it. I guess they're not smart enough to actually do this. There's only one group that's smart enough, I guess, in this state to actually deal with these issues, according to the criticism, and that's state officials. Well, you know, if the county governments and the city councils want to go out and hire somebody to actually advise them about this, they can do that. That's part of local control. County commissions and city councils can staff up and they can use taxpayer dollars in the ways that they think are appropriate, which could include, if they don't have this expertise already, which many do, frankly, if they don't have this expertise, they can go out and hire the expertise. That's what they do on a lot of other issues. They could do it on this. Now, if your local government doesn't want to go out and hire that person or people, or if they don't want to spend those taxpayer dollars, that's fine. That's why we have local control in this state, in order to make sure that each city council and county commission has the authority to do what they think is best, pursuant to what their constituents and their people want to have done. So I also heard that oil and gas is different. Oil and gas is special because of the minerals. But what I would refer you to is the Mine Land Reclamation Act, members. That deals with hard rock mining and also aggregate mining in a different part of the CRS. When you look at the Mine Land Reclamation Act, it actually is much, much broader than this bill. And it talks about land use authority, and it talks about permitting for land use authority. If we can do it for hard rock mining, which has the exact same kind of considerations, we can do it for oil and gas. We can do it. And in fact, other states do it this way, and we haven't had an issue in those other states. They have chosen to do it their way. So far, we have chosen to do it our way. But the problem is, there's an issue. There's an issue. The current system works very, very well for the industry. It doesn't work so well, though, if you live in these neighborhoods, particularly along the Front Range at this point, and you want to have a meaningful say in what happens in your neighborhood. It does not work well for them. And we've had hundreds and thousands of people come to the state task force, come to the COGCC, go to their local city councils and county commissions and tell them so. We need to listen to those people. We are trying to listen to those people by putting together this bill. And we hope that you'll pass it so that you can tell them also that you're listening to them. The current system works very well for the industry. They want it to stay in place as is. And they've been talking about that for years. They like the system as is. But there's another part of this equation. It's not just about the industry. It's about homeowners. It's about neighborhoods. It's about people in those neighborhoods and local governments. And that's what we need to change. We need to change that system.
Representative Wist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Foote, the system seems to be working pretty well for a lot of folks. Arapahoe County, Broomfield, Commerce City, Erie, Fort Collins, Hudson, Longmont, La Plata County, Greeley. To Representative Lebsack's issue in terms of what this bill does, we can move the pieces of the chessboard, but it is still the same game. Let's look at the language of this amendment and what it does. The amendment says that the operator is subject to local government's authority with regard to oil and gas facilities' noise, visual, and traffic impacts as provided by law, and shall ensure that oil and gas facilities comply with city, town, county, or city and county regulations with regard to oil and gas facilities' noise, visual, and traffic impacts. And what if they don't? They ban it. They stop production. This language results in the exact same siting determination that the original language of the bill intended. Don't be fooled by assurances that this language narrows the bill. The amendment goes on to say, quote, nothing in this section impairs or negates the authority of local governments to regulate oil and gas facilities with regard to their noise, visual, and traffic impacts. In other words, local government's authority and local government's pronouncements on these issues is final. It's determinative. It results in a ban. So members, this is still about an attempt to circumvent. It's still about an attempt for local governmental authority to trump the COGCC. And I want to emphasize, this came from a witness who appeared before a committee who was in favor of this bill. They described the current MOU process as the following: that it is composed of reasonable people, that it is a reasonable process, and it has reached reasonable conclusions. This came from someone who supported this bill. So if an opponent of our current system says that it is reasonable, I can't see how we would not reach the same conclusion. This bill will result in increased costs for taxpayers. This law will result in inefficiency. This law will result in a patchwork of regulation that was specifically we specifically sought to avoid by going down the path that we have. The Supreme Court is considering these exact issues. Representative Foote, I suppose we may have a slight disagreement in terms of what issue is before the court. It does go to the heart of the jurisdiction question, and that is, can local governments preempt the COGCC? That's precisely the issue before the court now. If no other point that I've made today resonates with you, I hope that one will, and that is that the Supreme Court will issue a ruling on this precise issue. Does it make sense for us as a body to act on this issue before the court acts and injecting confusion into the issue? Again, I urge a no vote on the bill.
Representative Arndt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise in support of House Bill 1355 and the committee report. Fort Collins proudly stands here as was recently in the newspaper. It was said that we have the strongest business climate in all of Colorado, and Colorado has a very strong business climate in all of the United States. And at the very same time, Fort Collins passed 7-0 in our city council, the strongest climate action plan in the entire country. Good business, good protection of the environment are not incompatible. People are moving to Fort Collins in droves for our quality of life and our business climate. We'd like to preserve this. In fact, we have a dark sky initiative that's going through our city right now. We'd love to control and continue to control the light, traffic, and noise associated with this heavy industry within our city. I urge an aye vote on this bill. Thank you.
Representative Moreno, Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, you know I can't resist coming down when Commerce City is mentioned. I have to tell you, so Commerce City did utilize the Memorandum of Understanding, the MOU process, but it's a mischaracterization to suggest that that process worked for Commerce City. I was on the City Council when we drafted those regulations on oil and gas, and I'll tell you from the outset that the regulations that we issued, that we put forward in an extraction agreement, did not address all of our constituents' or residents' concerns. They just didn't. They were all drafted in the mindset of trying to mitigate liability, of trying not to get our city sued. That's how those regulations were drafted. And I'll tell you, we even pushed the boundary then. We, for example, banned injection wells through our extraction agreement because not all communities are the same. And Commerce City has a unique history with injection wells. We experienced those at the Rocky Mountain Arsenal. They caused earthquakes in Commerce City in the 70s. Residents still talk about it. It happened. And at the Arsenal, if you recall, it's now a beautiful wildlife refuge, but at one point, they manufactured chemical weapons there. And that material is still buried in landfills out at the Arsenal. And so we looked at this and we thought, if oil and gas operations are going to occur in Commerce City, it is simply not a good idea to have injection wells near the Arsenal because the risk of releasing that contaminated material. So we did that. We passed that. So I think it's important to remember, members, that all communities are not the same across Colorado. There are unique characteristics and qualities to each community, and that's why this bill is important. That's why this bill should be passed, is because there are simply unique characteristics. Not the regulations that are currently put forward by the COGCC do not work for every community. Commerce City faced that, many other communities face that, and so that's why we should give local governments some say in how oil and gas operations occur in their communities.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1355? Representative Del Grosso, Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to address a couple things that I heard as well. Representative Salazar kept talking over and over and over again about how if they allow drilling that everybody's property values are going to go down and we should ask all the residents to stomach losing their property. Well, I've asked everybody in every committee that's heard any kind of a bill like this year, and I said, has one person came there to committee and testified at all and brought any evidence that property values have gone down? Not one. But I can show you that Weld County, where you can't throw a baseball and not hit some kind of drilling operation or some kind of oil and gas operation out there, and quite frankly, since the recession, their property values have not only rebounded faster than any other county in the state, they've actually gone higher. So if oil and gas somehow negatively affected your property values, wouldn't you think that Weld County would be one of the worst places in the country? No, they're one of the highest ones in the country. So on a fallacy that somehow, if we do this, we're going to ask residents to stomach a loss in their property values is just not true. But what we will result is you're going to take away somebody else's right to be able to access their mineral. That's the guarantee on a hypothetical that somebody might lose their property value, which is just not true.
And then we heard about all of this traffic, and we heard about all of these people coming there and thousands of people tromping through the neighborhoods and do this. How long do you think this actually goes on? This isn't something that is forever. They come, they drill, they frack, and then it's gone. It's not like it's something that's there for years. I submit the people that built a home next to me caused more of an annoyance to me than if they were actually drilling a well next to me. It was months and months of people hammering, sawing, and there was all kinds of construction traffic, and that was months and months and months. So I'd submit that was more of an annoyance to me than if they were actually drilling next to me. So members, this is a short-term thing. They come in, they go out, it's gone. It doesn't affect people's property values. This is just trying to scare people into something, and this is just not true. I urge a no vote on this.
Representative Salazar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Minority Leader, type in the words property value fracking. There you go. There's a bunch of them right there, from Forbes to Fox Business News to all sorts of other websites that you can go to. Type it in. You'll find it yourself. It's not a lie. It's exactly what it is. Property values go down. You may not like that fact, but it's a fact.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1355? Representative Wist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I promise members this will hopefully be my last time to the well on this bill. I just want to emphasize a couple of things. If this bill is truly about noise, if it's truly about traffic impacts, if it's truly about visual impacts, I suggest to you that if you look at COGCC Rule 603.H2, local governments have authority to regulate in all of those areas right now. But if this bill is truly about what I think it is, and that is utilizing those subject matters to ban drilling, then this really goes to the core of our objection with this bill. So again, I ask for a no vote. I ask you to look at existing law. If it's truly as narrow as the sponsor of the amendment offered, if it's truly as narrow as Representative Lebsack argued, then I'd suggest that our local governments are protected in existing law. Please vote no.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Here's the issue with the COGCC rules, and this is something that the industry and COGCC talks about all the time. If the locals were to pass a rule that would be in conflict with the COGCC rule, then the state and the industry claims that they're preempted by the commission. And so if they're preempted by the commission, then that means that, according to them, that the local state rule is actually invalid. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to say, no, no, no. In these areas, we're reaffirming the local ability to deal with rules in these three particular areas, regardless of what the COGCC says. That's a creature of statute. We can change the statute. That's what we do here. And we want to make sure that local governments have a say, particularly in these three areas.
Representative Klingenschmidt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I wasn't planning to speak until I heard my esteemed colleague, Representative Salazar, talk about jobs and talk about as it pertained to property values. And let me say that property values are impacted by this bill, and not in a good way. The property values that would be impacted by this bill, if it creates a disincentive for fracking, if it creates a disincentive for the oil industry, would be similar to what has already happened in the coal industry. You look at the property values in Meeker, Colorado, where the coal industry has been driven out and there are no jobs. Or how about Craig, Colorado, where the coal industry has been driven out and there are no jobs. What happened to their property values? They went down the drain. So this bill does have a negative impact, and I encourage a no vote.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Rodden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, we've heard a lot of discussion on both sides on this issue today. And one thing I just want to stress to you is that I'm here representing the people in my district who are very concerned about these issues and are being impacted by them. I think we all want to represent our constituents when they have issues that they feel helpless in dealing with. And I was there when the Arapahoe County Planning Commission was working on their MOU, and they spent, I think, 18 months working on it, doing lots of public testimony, doing lots of investigation, lots of research. They brought in expertise from the outside, and the Planning Commission came up with a pretty good MOU concept. Well, unfortunately, the county commissioners felt that it was putting them in too much jeopardy of lawsuits, and they watered down that MOU. So that process didn't exactly work out for everyone. And I just want you to be aware that this is a big threat for our local community governments when they feel that they can't do what they think is right because they'll be in a lawsuit. I know of 2 families, myself, who were so worried about impending oil and gas development in the Murphy Creek area that they sold their homes and left even at the bottom of the market. They were willing to take a huge loss because they were so fearful of what was going to happen. And frankly, those big developments are coming, and that's another issue that we haven't really talked about today. You know, back in the day, maybe even 5 years ago, I took one of the tours with the oil and gas industry and saw Weld County, and we saw a number of small little concrete pads out in the middle of a pasture, and how they had reclaimed the land around the operation, and how the fracking operation and the drilling operation together just took a few weeks and then they were gone. That is not what is happening now, folks. We are seeing large industrial complexes being built. The good news is we can drill multiple wells on a single pad. The bad news is the production facility that's built around that is huge. And the idea that it could be put right in the middle of your community, I mean, our residents just don't get how that can happen. And so, members, once again, what this bill does is simply reaffirms that our local governments do have authority in the areas of local control. And nothing more, nothing less. And if, you know, our friends are saying that right now the process is working really well to have different MOUs in every community, but then when we try to make a sort of blanket statement that yes, local governments do have authority, then all kinds of confusion is going to ensue. And somehow, I don't quite get that argument, but members, we're talking about large-scale facilities that have a lifetime of 20 to 25 years. This is not a single well pad out in somebody's pasture that isn't going to bother anybody. So I urge an aye vote on House Bill 1355. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1355? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill... Oh, I'm sorry. A division has been called. Would everyone not entitled to vote please leave? And would everyone please be seated until the question is called? Are we good? Are we good? Are you good? No? We good? The question before us in this division is the adoption of House Bill 1355. All those in favor, please stand. And please remain standing until we're fully counted. Please be seated. All those opposed, please stand. Please be seated. House Bill 1355 is lost. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to proceed out of order for the immediate consideration of House Bill 1422 by Representative Hamner and Rankin.
Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1422.
House Bill 1422, Representatives Hamner and Rankin, also Senators Lambert and Stedman, concerning financing public schools.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House Bill 1422 and the reports from the Education Committee and Appropriations Committee.
To the Appropriations Committee report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the Appropriations Committee, we allocated the money that was needed to fund the bill, and I ask for a yes vote of the Appropriations Committee report.
The question before us is the passage of the Appropriations Committee report. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. The Appropriations Committee report passes. To the Education Committee report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the Education Committee, there was a technical error that was suggested by the bill drafter. And whenever that happens, we usually go along with it. I ask for your support of the Education Committee report.
The question before us is the adoption of the Education Committee report. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. The Education Committee report is adopted. Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, this is our annual school finance bill, and it is really exciting news that we don't have to increase the negative factor and we get to increase school funding. I'm really proud of that work. I do have a couple amendments that I'd like to run. I move L010.
L010 has been properly moved and it is properly displayed. If you could wait one moment, Representative Hamner. Members, please tone it down just a little. Our colleagues are speaking at the well, so please give them some respect. On to the amendment, please, Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I thought they were being pretty respectful out there, all things considered, but thank you for that. Members, L010 removes the aspect of the bill that dealt with student funding limit of 50 students. We had originally wanted to fix an issue that we have in school finance where districts that are smaller than 50 get funded at 50 no matter how many students they have. We ran into some issues and concerns, and we don't think at this time that it's the right time to bring this issue forward. So L010 removes that language from the bill, and we'll figure out another way to solve that problem.
Representative Rankin.
And this is not to say that we don't intend to fix this problem for rural small schools, that
that are very much community schools. So we're not saying it doesn't need to fix. We're merely deferring it to a different forum.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask for a yes vote on Amendment L010.
Is there any further discussion on Amendment L010? Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, this particular issue prompted a great deal of debate as we were talking about the School Finance Act. It is an issue that we need to take a lot more time and consideration to deal with this issue. As Representative Rankin said, it's not going to go away. We're certainly going to deal with it. I appreciate Representative Hamner bringing this amendment to pull that off the school finance bill, and I urge an aye vote on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion of L010? Representative Lundin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would like to rise in support of this amendment as well. This was one of the pieces of the bill as presented in committee that presented significant consternation. Pulling it out improves the bill. It does what we need to do, and that is to have a serious policy conversation around the significant policy implications that this section of the bill would have brought, and to pull it out is appropriate so we can consider this in the full length of time. I urge support of this amendment.
Is there any further discussion on L010? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L010. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say no.
What?
L010 is adopted. Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move L015 and ask that it be displayed.
L015 has been properly moved and is now displayed. To the amendment, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Amendment L015 is a technical adjustment to the size factor increase. It really narrows the increase to districts between 3,500 and 5,000. It actually reduces the fiscal note. And in the education, hearing with the department and the Joint Budget Committee, we heard from Leanne M., who works with the Department of Education, and she highlighted how difficult it is for districts that are around 5,000 to make it financially, and many of these districts are funded at the same level as districts significantly higher. So this is a very tiny adjustment, and I think it means a lot to districts that are in that size category, and I ask for a yes vote.
Is there further discussion on L015? Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Representative Hamner, for bringing this amendment. Again, this caused considerable discussion during the Education Committee, and amongst those who are involved with the education world. The School Finance Act was passed in 1994. We've made considerable adjustments to it since that time, and this is one of those adjustments. One of the things I'd like to point out to you all as my colleagues, as you look at the school formula, understand that there's a large number of very small districts. There's a considerable number of large districts. That wasteland in between, there's not that many districts, and they have considerable unique challenges. This addresses some of those unique challenges, and I would ask for your support of this amendment.
Is there further discussion on L015? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L015. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. L015 is passed. Representative, Madam Assistant Minority Leader.
I like the first one better.
Please proceed, Representative
Thank you,
Lawrence.
Madam Chair. I move Amendment L009 and ask that it be displayed.
L009 has been properly moved and is
getting close to being displayed.
Is getting there. Thank you. L009 is now properly displayed. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, this amendment helps with some of the districts that are significantly impacted by, like in the Cripple Creek District, they get the majority of their mill levy from the Victor Gold Mine. And when a portion of that mine is closed down because of commodity rates, they don't have any control over the mill levies that come into their district. And so what this is doing is allowing these school districts that are hit hard significantly to apply for a grant to replace up to 50% of the negative factor that will affect their funding for the school district, rather than, as the bill states, they can apply for a loan of up to 100%. These districts would prefer to have the option to go to a grant for the 50%. It gives them a little bit of time rather than having that loan for 100% that they then have to pay back completely the next year. In these areas where they are affected by, as I said, the Victor Gold Mine, commodity prices are going down. They close a significant section of that mine, and that takes a huge amount of tax base from the school district that they have no forewarning about. And they don't know when those mill levies are going to come back up again, because it all depends on economic forecasts and situations on a global market. This gives them the ability to apply for a grant for 50% that would come from the contingency and remove the burden of having to pay back a 100% loan the following school year. So I would ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion of L009? Representative Rankin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, I think this is an important issue to a few districts. Interestingly enough, all 6 of the districts I represent fall in the category where this could happen to, so it's something very dear to my heart. I think that there are a couple of issues I'd like to discuss, and I actually do oppose the amendment for the following reason. First of all, this would limit them to 50%. In Meeker 2 years ago, we actually ran a separate bill to backfill this when it happened. The basic problem here is that property taxes can be very volatile in an area where they're mining or oil and gas supported. So if, in fact, those property taxes come in at considerably less, then these districts that had been fully supported with local funding, in other words, they had this total program, what we call total program, and all of a sudden they get hit with some negative factor up to 13%. The replacement of that in mid-year is almost necessary to keep the teachers paid for the rest of the year. So 2 years ago, we had this in Meeker and 2 other districts, and we ran a bill to backfill them and give them that money to get through the year. However, and we can do that again. We always will work. I mean, there's such a small number of these districts that we can take action in the middle of the year to backfill them. I would rather have them have the ability to 100% backfill, because in Meeker 2 years ago, had we given them a grant we gave them a grant for 100%. If we had given them a 50% grant, they would have laid off teachers. They would have cut back something in the school to get through the year. So they need the ability to go to 100%. I think it ought to be a loan rather than a grant, just from experience. I think they need to be able to plan. You can see these things coming, not always, but sometimes. So these districts should be able to plan ahead. They should be able to accommodate this negative factor decrease by planning for the next year. So in general, I think that, we thought a lot about this. We talked to the districts. I think the loan idea is really good. It's really novel. It would have saved those 3 2 years ago, and I think it's good planning for the future. So I would urge you to stick with the bill the way it's written. Thank you.
Representative Lawrence. Madam Assistant Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, Representative Rankin, I understand that you wrote a separate bill to fully fund your district previously. What my district is asking for is a grant for up to 50%, because they don't want to take out a 100% loan. They feel that a 50% loan, that they are sharing in some of the burden that other districts have suffered through as they're dealing with the negative factor, but they would prefer this to be a grant, much like you wrote in a separate bill for your district earlier. This is just an opportunity. You're right, there are not very many districts that are dealing with this same impact of oil and gas and mining. But for those districts who are dealing with it, it is significant to them. And what they have asked for in this amendment is the ability to apply for a grant for up to 50% of the cuts that they're going to be sustaining. So this is actually less of a burden than what the bill that you had run previously for the Meeker district when you allowed for 100% grant. They're just asking for a 50% grant to get them through this. And if they have the ability to plan ahead, if they know what global markets are going to be doing for oil and gas and mining, yeah, you're right, they could plan for it. But it's awfully hard to know what global commodity markets are going to be doing and whether the Victor Gold Mine is going to be closing a portion of their operations from year to year. This gives them the ability to soften that blow without completely eliminating it, because there are districts all around the state who have dealt with negative factor impacts on their budgets. This gives them the ability to just soften that blow and plan ahead. I would ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
Representative Becker Jay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, just like the amendment prior to this that was taking care of our dilemma with the 50 students or less, this amendment is fair. This is a much bigger discussion that we should have as we go along of how these things can be handled, and I think we need to have that. But when we're dealing with oil and gas and these evaluations, sometimes they cannot be controlled, or we know that far ahead of time that we need to budget for it. Also, this chamber has already done this before to a tune of 100% grant for other school districts. Why are we now balking at this now, saying that we need to plan ahead and we need to make sure that they have the money to do that? We already know that we have some crisis in some of these smaller school districts or school districts that deal with oil and gas evaluations or mining. This is not a big ask. This is something that we've already done with a small burden to the state and actually helps these school districts get through. Just like with the 50 that we did earlier, this is a discussion that we should have, and how do we control this? This is not an unreasonable request. If we're really out to help our school districts, we need to make sure that we vote yes on this amendment.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And colleagues, I ask for a no vote on this amendment, and let me try to explain. First of all, I'd say the larger issue that we're dealing with here is the negative factor. That's the big issue, and that's what's affecting this conversation and precipitating the introduction of this amendment. And the situation here is that we have some districts that are very small in size, and they have some property wealth in their district because of business and industry, and they're basically self-funded. In other words, they need no state support in order to fund their total program. And they're in a very unique and I would say somewhat enviable position, because the fact that they're self-funded at the local level means that they're not subject to the negative factor. So what happens when that revenue fluctuates locally, then they do need some state aid, and because the negative factor affects all districts that get state aid, then for the first time they're being held to the negative factor. Initially in the bill, we put in language that was trying to be sensitive to these districts to allow them to borrow from the contingency reserve fund that really is intended for drastic natural disaster emergencies in districts like floods or fires or something like that, to help them recover. It's very rarely used. I thought it'd be nice to expand the definition of the use of that fund to have an interest-free loan to these districts to help them recover if they hadn't planned for the negative factor like all the other districts are subject to. Now what this amendment is doing is saying that they wouldn't have to pay back half of those borrowed funds. And that really puts us in a strange situation with fairness around the other districts and access to these funds, and also being fairly applying the negative factor to all the districts. So for those reasons, although I do appreciate what the sponsors are trying to do, the bigger solution is let's get rid of the negative factor for all districts. The short-term solution today is please do not support this amendment. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Representative Becker Jay.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. And members, because the school district was funded completely by themselves, shouldn't we appreciate that? Shouldn't we say thank you to them? Shouldn't we make sure that we take care of them in their time of need? If the evaluation goes down, we really can't control that. They didn't know it was happening so quickly, but it did. And now, when we've already set precedent that we have given 100% grant in this situation, we are now going to say, we don't even want to allow you 50% grant in this situation to take care of what you're doing. Why is that? Why can we not take care of these school districts as we go? This isn't a huge ask for them. We've done it in the past. We need to make sure that because evaluations can fluctuate rather quickly, as we see with severance taxes as well, we need to make sure that we're taking care of these school districts. To burden them with a 100% loan when they're already struggling, to me, seems unfair, especially when we've already set the precedent. And oddly enough, the gentleman that asked us not to do this was for his school district. So why is it fair for one and not for the other? I'd ask you for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion on L009? Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, by a show of hands, how many of you have a district that's affected by this in your representative district? 1, 2. Here's my point. This will be decided by those of you in this chamber who don't have a dog in this hunt. But I want you to understand what you'll be voting on. There are 2 issues here. And Representative Becker was talking about how to take care of the districts, and that's the issue. Here's the issue. 1, the bill allows for interest-free loans for up to 100% of the negative factor impact. A loan has to be repaid. There's no impact on state dollars. The amendment would allow for grants up to 50% of the negative factor impact. Grants don't have to be repaid. The state will have to backfill dollars. Those are the 2 issues. You need to decide which one of those you are voting for.
Is there any further discussion on L009? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of L009. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed to L009, please say no. No. Amendment L009 fails. Is there any further discussion on House Bill 1422? Representative Lundeen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I do appreciate the discussion we're having on these policy issues that were embedded in this finance bill. The next question I would raise is a question that is fundamental. It goes to, in fact, a constitutional question. We're dealing with an incredibly complex financial formula. And in the course of dealing with this formula, we are bumping up against the limitations of the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. In Section 7 of the bill, you can read the bill in such a way that it raises the question, can districts keep funds that would, without this bill, be returned or not collected in the future without a vote of the people? And I guess I would drop that question back to the members of the JBC. It appears to me that, in fact, we're doing an end run around the Taxpayer Bill of Rights with this Section 7 portion that deals with the buyout of categorical programs.
Representative Rankin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So the interpretation is basically goes, if all of you remember mill levy freeze, the interpretation of the law is that by statute we can freeze mill levies. That's really what this amounts to. So if it gets above categorical, we freeze it and use the extra money. Now that's the interpretation. You may or may not want to do this, but the interpretation is we can freeze that mill levy and roll this over to a reserve. Remember, if the mill levy drops and we need to raise it again, we would have to go back to the voters. So that's my understanding of the law around this. That doesn't mean we want to do it. It just means we think we can do it.
Any further discussion? Representative Lundeen.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk, L016, and I ask that it be displayed as I move it.
Representative Amendment L016, not a representative.
I get confused with a lot of different members of the House. I've never been confused with a cipher before.
Excuse me, Representative, and is properly displayed. Okay.
Thank you. So what this amendment would do is strike the section that I believe leaves open the question of whether we're violating the Taxpayer Bill of Rights or not. It has been moved, and I urge your support of it.
Is there discussion? Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I ask for a no vote on this amendment. One of the reasons we put this language in the bill is we were trying to help the very districts that Representative Lawrence was advocating for. And this is a way to help those districts rather than having their mill levy float down because they're now getting more revenue. We're allowing them through the statutory change that doesn't affect our state constitution or TABOR. We're allowing them to keep the mill levy at a higher level so that they can retain that revenue and help offset the costs that they're facing because of the negative factor. So I thought this was a really good solution, and this amendment undoes that for no reason. So I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Further discussion. Representative Wist.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question, members, is whether or not we can require a local school district to raise a mill without the taxpayers' approval. The question is not whether the current statute authorizes that. The question is whether or not that statute is constitutional, whether or not it's consistent with the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. That's the precise issue addressed by this amendment, and I urge a yes vote.
Is there further discussion on L016? Representative Lundin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I would urge the members to pay attention to this. This is, in fact, a place where we are, by force of statute, trying to, in fact, I believe, contradict the Constitution. I urge your support of this amendment to back away from that in protection of the Constitution.
Representative Court.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This has been decided. It was called the Mesa decision. I think it was about 3-4 years ago that we can do this. So we don't need this amendment because the Mesa decision made it clear that what the sponsors are proposing is completely legal. It was the Colorado Supreme Court in the Mesa decision. Thank you. Vote no on the amendment, please.
Any further discussion on L016? Seeing none, the question before us is the adoption of L016. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. Amendment L016 is lost. To the bill. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would move L017 and ask that it be displayed.
L017 has been properly moved and displayed. To the amendment, please, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What this amendment does is it takes money at the end of the 2016-17 year, anything that is left over, and then puts it into the state education fund. And this is just, I think that we need to build up that fund. It's been robbed from. We need to build that up so that we've got a good cushion there so that we make sure that we do not increase the negative factor in following years. And I would ask for an aye vote on this amendment.
Further discussion. Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I ask for a no vote on this amendment, although I do appreciate Representative Brown trying so hard to get money back in that state education fund. He mentioned how, well, two things. One, now that I'm on the Budget Committee, I see that how this policy is not a very good one. When I wasn't on the Budget Committee, I would have been advocating for something like this, but it's just not a good policy decision for budgeting. The second thing is when he talked about being able to use these funds from the state education fund to buy down the negative factor. It's problematic to use one-time funds that we would have for this purpose for ongoing costs in funding schools. So the intended purpose to buy down the negative factor actually wouldn't work. So I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Is there any further discussion? Representative Becker-Jay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I don't understand why we would say this isn't good policy for the state. We actually ran this when I was sitting on the Joint Budget Committee, and it actually put a lot of money in the state education fund, and had we not done that, I think we would have been in even more trouble. This is very responsible budgeting as we move forward. This allows us to put money that's not going anywhere, not budgeted for anything, into the state education fund so that it takes care of education. Isn't that what we've been speaking about? Isn't that what everybody wanted? That's what this does. To say that this is not good budgeting is, I still don't understand it. This allows us to plan ahead and have some money in there. This is exactly what we did years ago that got money into the state education fund. I think the problem is that the Joint Budget Committee enjoys being able to play with those dollars and put them where they want, rather than where this legislature and you and I would rather it go. I would vote yes on this amendment.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't want there to be any confusion on this. I didn't mean that this money in the state education fund could pay down the negative factor. What I am saying is that putting money into the state education fund builds up that fund so that in future years we do not have to increase the negative fund, the negative factor, which I think is unconstitutional anyway. But anyway, what this would do is increase the amount of money in that state education fund, increase that cushion there so that, if we get in a bind, we can fund K-12 education fully and not have to increase that negative factor. So I would ask for a yes vote on this amendment.
Representative Lundin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members, listen. Listen. What do you hear there? You hear a clarion call. You hear a trumpet blast. It is saying education is a priority in the state of Colorado. This is a brilliant amendment that helps us clarify our priorities. It's an amendment that makes the statement that if we have excess money accumulating, we want it to go to the school children of Colorado. I urge your support for the Brown Amendment. I think this is a spectacular amendment, a brilliant thought, and a clear statement of our priorities that our children, the students of Colorado, come first.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm still trying to sort out in my mind what a clarion call is. I'm not clear on that. Representative Hamner, a question putting on our superintendent's hats from past years.
No, I'm still good.
When this sweep occurred several years ago, there was over $1 billion that went into the state education fund, which we, now that I am up here with you in the House, I see how that has literally saved our bacon in terms of the School Finance Act. How are we going to maintain the state education fund if we do not do this type of sweep?
Is there any further discussion on L017? Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of L017. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. No. Amendment L017 is lost. Further discussion on House Bill 1422. Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I ask for a yes vote on House Bill 1422. It is a really important bill. As I said earlier, it helps us fund schools at an increase per pupil without increasing the negative factor. A lot of hard work has gone into this bill, and I appreciate running it with Representative Rankin.
Representative Rankin.
I think this bill demonstrates to K-12 education that the legislature puts them high in priority. We pulled off really miracles to avoid a major cut this year, so this should be a great sign that K-12 is #1 on our list. So thank you all for your votes for this bill.
Further discussion on House Bill 1422. Seeing none, the question before us is the passage of House Bill 1422 as amended. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. House Bill 1422 is passed. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1331 until April 5th.
You've heard the motion. House Bill 1331 is laid over until April 5th. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1420 and House Bill 1421 until April 6th.
You've heard the motion. House Bill 1420, 1421 are laid over until April 6th. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm almost done. I move to lay over House Bill 1311 until April 6th as well.
You've heard the motion. House Bill 1311 is laid over until April 6th. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you,
Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to lay over House Bill 1397 until April 11th.
You've heard the motion. House Bill 1397 is laid over until April 11th. Madam Majority Leader.
And the last one, I move to lay over House Bill 1365 until April 5th.
You've heard the motion. House Bill 1365 is laid over until April 5th. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
You've heard the motion. Hearing no objection, the committee will rise and report.
The House will come back to order. Mr. Kohler, please read the report of the Committee of the Whole.
Madam Speaker, Committee of the Whole begs the reports under consideration of the following attached bills being second reading. The makes following recommendations are on. House Bill 1422 as amended, passed on second reading and are gross placed on counter for third and final passage. House Bills 1331 and 1365 laid over until April 5th, retaining their place on the calendar. House Bills 1311, 1420, and 1421 laid over until April 6th, retaining their place on the calendar. House Bill 1397 laid over until April 11th, retaining its place on the calendar. House Bill 1355 as amended, lost.
Representative Mitch Bush.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I move the House adopt the report of the Committee of the Whole.
There are amendments on the desk. You've heard the motion. Mr. Kohler, please read the Foote amendment to the Committee of the Whole.
Representative Foote moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee in not adopting House Bill 1355 to show that House Bill 1355 as amended passed.
Representative Foote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move the Foote Amendment to the Committee of the Whole report.
Proper motion and properly displayed. Please proceed, Representative Foote.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, you might have to excuse me for being a little confused in this case, because when I listen to the multi-million-dollar PR campaign by the oil and gas industry, I hear things like, we should do this right, and we should all work together, and we should come to a reasonable accommodation about what happens. Well, I'm just a little bit confused because I understand the rhetoric, but I also understand the reality of what's happening, particularly in our Front Range communities, Larimer County, Boulder County, Broomfield County, Arapahoe County, and others, Adams County. Adams County is feeling it now, but this is what Boulder County went through a couple of years ago. Arapahoe County will go through the same thing. The reality is far from the rhetoric in this case. I'm also a little confused because, again, going back to the PR campaign that we've heard, there was who knows how many robocalls sent out to people to ask people to vote against this bill. And what we heard from people actually being asked to call into their representative and vote no were things like, House Bill 1355 is going to turn your lights off. House Bill 1355 is a fracking ban. House Bill 13, this is one of my favorites. House Bill 1355 is going to take away power from the local governments and give it to corrupt state officials. That's one of my favorite, because that's exactly the opposite of what we're trying to do with this local control bill. I'm also confused because I hear the industry that is opposing this bill, and they talk about why they're opposing this bill, and they sometimes seem to be talking out of both sides of their mouth. They say things like, oh, we don't want to do this because it's going to lead to a patchwork of regulations. We don't want that. Yet, on the other hand, you hear, we want the local governments to engage in the MOU process. This is great. We like it. Except for the fact that the MOU process leads to the patchwork of regulations. So, and about the MOU process, we heard testimony in the committee actually that was clear. It's not working that well for a lot of local governments because the bargaining position is unequal, inherently unequal when it comes to the MOU process. And that's because they know, as we heard from a couple of members here today, they know where the power lies. They know if they go against the industry then saddles up and decides we're going to sue, or at the very least threatens to sue. And local governments don't want to go through that. What we hear is, we hear talk about the absolute miracle of horizontal drilling and fracking and how it leads us to be able to unlock all these new resources, and how the industry has the technology and the ability to drill from as far as 2 to 2.5 miles away. But then we hear, oh, we don't really want to do that. We don't want to drill from maybe an extra 500 feet away because it may be a little more expensive. We don't want to do that. So we have a miracle on the one hand, and we have our lack of desire to do anything on the other hand. We hear from the industry that the local consultation process that is in place now is perfectly fine and perfectly adequate. And as a matter of fact, we should follow the rules that were promulgated by the COGCC this last year, dealing with, as it turns out, less than 1% of the wells that are going to be drilled. And we should just follow that. But if you listened, like I did and some others did, to that process, you would have heard absolute opposition from groups like COGA to even putting that into place. Now what we hear is, oh, this is great. We should let it go through, and this is no reason to pass a bill now to try to address the local control issue. We hear and heard today that local governments actually have this type of authority that deals with lighting and lighting and traffic. But then we heard, oh no, we're still opposed to this kind of authority being given, or at least I should say reaffirmed, to the local governments. Again, we're hearing it out of both sides and talking out of both sides of their mouth. This bill was designed to address a problem. The problem is our current system. Our current system works quite well for the oil and gas industry. Our current system does not work very well for affected homeowners and local governments. In committee, we heard from many, many local officials that talked about this very dynamic, where they want to actually work on behalf of their constituents, but then the oil and gas industry comes in and they say, no, 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 do what we've already obtained permission from the state to do, or else you're going to get sued. And it puts the local governments in a box. The rhetoric is, let's all cooperate. The reality is, no, we're going to litigate. And this bill is designed to address that, to make sure that local governments can have a meaningful say, and most importantly, the residents in this area where drilling is occurring can have a meaningful say in what happens in their backyards. We don't have it now. We need it. I ask you to vote yes on this amendment.
Further discussion on House Bill 1355, Foot Amendment to the Committee of the Whole. Representative Wist.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, we heard a good, healthy debate on this. The fact is that we do have a system that's working. We do have a system that allows local governments to have substantive impact on these issues. What this bill actually does is provide local governments with authority under the areas addressed in that amendment to ban fracking, to ban oil and gas development, the exact issue that the Supreme Court is considering right now. I applaud the members for your prudence and your wisdom in terms of rejecting this bill. This is not a bill that's well thought through, certainly not a bill that's grounded in fact or good legal consideration. And I suggest to you that we have, for many years now, developed a process and developed a system that has collaboration from all sides, including local governments. Let's stay the course. I urge a no vote on this amendment.
Further discussion on the Foot Amendment to the Committee of the Whole. Representative Ryden.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just wanted to remind folks of a couple of issues that we discussed earlier. One is whether there is case law that supports this bill, and indeed there is. It was the 1992 Bowen-Edwards case, which clearly gave local authority to our local governments in these issues. And again, one of the reasons that our local governments are not taking the authority that they already own is because of the threat of litigation if they should do that. And members, I would not be here if it weren't for my constituents and their concerns. I understand that industry is certainly wanting to get the best value for their dollars. They want to get the best profit for the investment. Full disclosure, I own oil stocks. But when it comes to people's health and safety and their property values, they don't have anyone else speaking for them but us. This is our job, is to look out for our people of the state of Colorado. And that is what I'm doing as a co-sponsor on this bill. And I can tell you that in my experience here in the legislature, and some of you all weren't here in 2010, 11, 12, when these issues first started, that even though the bill I brought in 2013 did not pass, it did encourage the Oil and Gas Commission to do new rulemaking. And I think we have to keep, our job is to represent the people and to continue to do that. And hopefully we will move things forward by doing that. Sometimes a bill may not pass, but it will result in action being taken. I do want this bill to pass, but I also feel that we need to continue talking about these issues and continue standing strong for the people of Colorado. Thank you.
Representative Mitch Bush.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Excuse me. I urge a yes vote on this. As I think all of you know, I'm a former county commissioner, and before that I served 10 years on the Routt County Planning Commission. Routt County has been an oil and gas county and a coal county for a very long time. We have one of the oldest oil and gas wells in the state of Colorado still operating. When we first encountered this set of issues, we had a good deal of trouble in terms of negotiating these MOUs, and we stuck to it. We were threatened with lawsuits, and we stuck to it. I do not see this bill as providing for a ban. It reaffirms existing land use authority under Colorado statute. It does not lead to a ban. In fact, local control for land use planning does not allow bans. So this cannot be seen as leading to a ban. Thank you.
Further discussion on the Foote amendment to the Committee of the Whole report. Seeing none, Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 32 ayes and 33 noes, the Foote amendment to the Committee of the Whole report is lost. Mr. Kohler, please read the Lawrence amendment to the Committee of the Whole regarding House Bill 1422.
Representative Lawrence moved to amend the report of the Committee of the Whole to reverse the action taken by the committee in not adopting the following Lawrence Amendment L009 to House Bill 1422 to show that said amendment passed and that House Bill 1422 as amended passed.
Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I move the Lawrence amendment to the Committee of the Whole. Members, we had a pretty good discussion on this earlier. And what this is doing is giving those school districts who are hit hard by the economic downturn based on oil and gas or mining the ability to apply for a grant of up to 50% of the impact that they are feeling due to the negative factor. Now, we heard from Representative Rankin that this is not terribly unusual. In fact, he wrote a bill or helped sponsor a bill a couple of years ago to allow for a grant of 100% of the impact on his school district. The school finance bill is written that these districts can apply for a loan of 100% as long as they pay it back the following year. What my district is asking for in Cripple Creek, because of the impact of the Victor Gold Mine, is that they have the ability to apply for the grant of up to 50%. They recognize that they shouldn't be unaffected by the negative impact, and so they're not asking for 100%, which was granted earlier in a previous bill in a previous session. What they're asking for is 50%. Because sometimes they can't budget ahead of time for what global economic conditions are going to be. They don't know what the price of commodities are going to be. So it's when you hear, well, they just need to be able to budget better. We don't always know what global economic impacts are going to have on our little school districts. And yes, this doesn't affect a lot of school districts in the state, but for those that it does affect, it has a big impact. They're asking for a little bit of help, the ability to apply for a grant for 50% of the impact. I ask for an aye vote on this.
Representative Rankin.
Well, the bill 2 years ago actually covered more than just my district. It covered a number of them, one in Weld County, one in Mesa County. These were districts that had been completely funded. That is, they had been funded to total program, while many other districts throughout the state take a 13% cut as a result of the negative factor. What happened was, because of mid-year, these districts would have had to actually lay off teachers. They couldn't make payroll. So that's why we funded them for the rest of the year. They should, all of them should plan better looking forward, and they do now, having experienced that downturn. Had the Meeker, the one that was in my district of the four, the one that was in my district would have, had they gotten a 50% grant, they would have laid off teachers. 100% loan allows them to get through the year and plan for the next year. The loan situation is simply a better solution.
Further discussion, Representative Jay Becker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I think Representative Rankin made our point for us. This is a hardship for these school districts. We've set precedent before to give grants to 100%. For up to 4 school districts we were talking about then. Why are we in any different situation? Why is this any different now than it was then? Other than we probably should have spoke about it and figure out how we were going to take care of this rather than just saying they should have planned better. You know how fast this moves and how fast the evaluations with oil and gas and mining move back and forth. This is a simple solution. 50%, not 100%, 50%. And it's the same situation as saying if we don't do this, they may be laying off teachers. They may not be able to afford to move forward. I'm confused as to why we say we were okay doing 100% then, but gosh darn it, we can't do it now. That doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't pass the smell test that we all put through here. It's the same request, except for it's only 50% compared to 100%. And we're going to say a loan is a much better situation. How is a loan a much better situation? They're still in the hardship. We're asking for 50%. It was good then for those school districts. It should be good now. We should be worried about these school districts moving forward. We talk about it all the time. Please vote yes.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I ask for a no vote on the Lawrence Amendment to the report of the Committee of the Whole, and I'll try to explain why. First of all, the fund that we're talking about is that contingency reserve fund, and that might sound familiar to some of you because that's the fund we had to restore this year because a drafting error inadvertently struck it from state statute. So the fund is there for emergencies when districts face an act of God kind of emergency or some unanticipated financial emergency. So the fund is there, and it's very rarely used. If we start being able to use this fund for financial situations that include being able to pay the negative factor, which all districts face, then I don't think we're ever going to have enough money. Well, we need about $850 million in that fund to help all the districts deal with the impact of the negative factor. So that's my first issue. The fund can't accommodate those kinds of uses without finding an additional revenue source into the fund. Secondly, I have great empathy for these districts because they're, on the positive side, they're districts that can fully fund themselves at the local level. And so that's a good thing. The disadvantage is whenever they dip below that and don't have the local funds to pay for their total program, then the state budget kicks in. And that's how school finance works. So as soon as the state budget kicks in and helps them meet their total program, unfortunately, because in the state of Colorado we have a negative factor, they face the negative factor and they don't get the 100% of the state allocation like all the other districts. So it puts them in the category of being treated like the other districts. So for those two reasons, I ask for a no vote on this amendment.
Further discussion, Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, have you all understood this discussion up here totally, fully? We're talking about $6 billion out of our budget for K-12 funding. It's something we all need to zero in on. I think all of you have probably seen this in some of your handouts, haven't you? As superintendents, we got multiple copies of this. We killed half of a forest every year on school finance. Each time something happened here in the Capitol, we'd get a new printout on this. In order for you to make an informed vote on this amendment, you need to look at this document. How bad off are the districts that we're talking about, and how well off are those districts we're talking about? I had no idea until I started looking at this and started looking at the figures that were there. Here are the issues. How did the districts we're talking about have to cut back in prior years when they were fully funded? Or did they? How bad are these cuts going to be? As I look, for example, Representative Lawrence, I'm thinking about districts and not about people. As I looked at the district she was talking about, the cuts that they are facing in assessed valuation still place that district higher in assessed valuation than the district I was superintendent in. So you don't know that until you look at these figures. And I'm not saying one way or the other, but you've got to look at the figures, folks, to figure out what's going on. If they were fully funded, did they cut back? Were they struggling at that point? Because the districts that have the negative factor have had to cut back. The question that I'm struggling with, and I told Representative Lawrence this, I'm really struggling with this piece, is why take dollars that can go to all districts that are struggling with the negative factor and give them, not loan them, but give them to districts that have now said hello to the negative factor for the first time. And I understand what Representative Becker is saying. This is not the first time we've done this. I agree. It's not the first time we've done this. Are we going to decide that each time that a district goes into a downturn that we are going to give them money? That's what we're voting on. Because I'll guarantee you, districts will continue to return if they're going to see the opportunity to have that money replaced. I would do it in a minute. As a superintendent in Salida, I would do it in a minute. So my challenge to you folks, however you vote on this, don't just do it because of what side of the aisle you're sitting on. Do some homework on it. It's huge. It's huge. K-12 education is a huge issue in our budget. Know what you're voting on. Thank you.
Representative Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, members, I think we do know what we're voting on, and I think we need to focus back on the fact that in previous legislatures, we have allowed grants of 100% of the negative factor to go out to certain school districts because they needed it. And I will tell you that Cripple Creek, which is in my district, has struggled. Now, you're going to hear that they've been fully funded and life is great down there, but I'll tell you, talking to the superintendent of that district, they have struggled. And they're not asking for a free pass on this. They're asking for the ability to get a grant of up to 50% of the impact. Considering that we have given 100% grants in the past, I don't think districts asking for a grant of up to 50% is that much to ask for. They are still recognizing that they need to share in some of the pain that other districts around the state have dealt with. And they recognize that, and they're not saying, hey, hold us harmless, we don't want to have to cut anybody. They're recognizing that they're going to have to continue to adjust their budgets to work within the school finance plan that we have in the state of Colorado. And I would say what this actually does is it shows us that we change from year to year. 2 years ago, we gave grants of 100%. This year, we're struggling over a grant of up to 50%. Maybe what this really calls us to do is take a serious look at school finance in Colorado and figure out how we're going to fund our schools appropriately in every district. This is not a big ask, members, and it's not for a lot of school districts. But some of these districts who have suffered suddenly under the impacts of declining oil and gas revenue and mining revenue, they need a little bit of help. So they're asking for the right to apply for a 50% grant to help them out. I ask for a yes vote on this.
Representative Jay Buckner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, I won't go back through what we've been speaking about, but one of the issues that was made is look to see if these districts suffered, essentially, or were harmed while the other districts were being harmed by the negative factor. I understand that argument. That's one of the first arguments that went through my head. But remember that these school districts were fully funded, so I would say by themselves, so I would say they actually helped in that situation as well. And to say that because they didn't suffer before, we shouldn't help them now is probably not a great argument. Because they face the same consequences as school districts before as well. Laying off teachers, laying off staff, cutting programs. All the things we speak about, they're still facing. Whether or not they suffered enough is not something I want to look at. Whether or not we want to help them is what we're looking at. 50% grant in order to help them and save programs in these school districts is not much to ask. Do we have an issue? Yes. We've seen that with several amendments on the school finance bill. Do we need to sit down and talk and figure out how this can be corrected? You bet. But I'm not willing to bet programs and teachers right now on a discussion in the future. Let's make sure we're taking care of these school districts. Please vote yes.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and colleagues, not to belabor this point, but I do think that the questions that are being raised are excellent questions. I agree 100% with Assistant Minority Leader Representative Lawrence that we have problems with school finance. And this issue raises just one problem of the 100 problems that we have with school finance. And I really appreciate the efforts of the Education Committee in both the House and the Senate working in hand with the Budget Committee to study these issues. Another bill that we hope to introduce later in the session would take on some of these bigger issues. But back to this amendment, and the reason that I'm asking for a no vote is that even though it looks like it's helping one district through this small change, it actually is a policy decision that can affect many districts. And I don't think that this fund has the capacity to deal with all the districts that would line up in turn asking for the state to fund 50% of their negative factor. So I ask for a no vote. Thank you.
Further discussion on the Lawrence amendment to the Committee of the Whole report. Seeing none, Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 24 ayes and 41 noes, the Lawrence amendment to the Committee of the Whole report is lost. Mr. Kohler, please read the Brown amendment to the Committee of the Whole.
Representative Brown moved to amend the report of the committee to hold diversity action taken by the committee in not adopting the following Brown Amendment L017 to House Bill 1422 to show that said amendment passed and that House Bill 1422 as amended passed.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would move the Brown Amendment to the Committee of the Whole.
It's proper motion and properly displayed. Please proceed, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And all this does is just doesn't take money from anybody or anything, but it at the end of the year, if there's any money left over after everything's been reconciled, it would just build up that state education fund. I think that we need to do this so that We don't have to, it just gives us a little cushion so that we don't have to worry about adding to the negative factor, which everyone knows is $831 million. And we just don't want to add to that. And this would help us to get that cushion that we need. And I would ask that you support this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Jay Becker. Thanks for giving me a second chance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You can call me anything.
Go, please proceed, Representative Jay Becker.
Members, this amendment is, you're going to hear from the JBC. I'm sure they're going to come up here in force, or at least Hamner's going to come up here. Representative Hamner, sorry. I think that we've already proven that this amendment works. We've passed this before in the JBC. This amendment helped us get the state education fund up where it did a lot of good. This is good policy. This is to say that monies that aren't encumbered can go to the state education fund. Isn't that where we're all arguing? Isn't that where we're saying the money should be going? This doesn't allow the JBC to put it anywhere else, or us to put it anywhere else. It goes into the state education fund to make sure that we have money to pay for K through 12 education in the state of Colorado. I don't think you should have to argue it. It's exactly what we've been arguing here all day. It's exactly what we need. We've proven this works before. I hope that you'll support it again.
Representative Lundin.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Representative Brown, in his inimitable style, comes up here and says, gee shucks, this just does a little thing. But I'm here to tell you, this is enormous what this does. This makes very clear what our priorities are. It defines the fact that if we have extra funds available, we want those to go to our school children. I think this is, as I said before, a brilliant amendment. Representative Brown is doing us all a favor with this little thing with an enormous consequence, and that is clarifying our perspective on our priorities, putting the school children first. Representative Brown, thank you very much for this amendment.
Representative Hamner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And colleagues, thank you so much for your interest in trying to find more sustainable funding for K-12. I'd argue that this is not the place to go for finding sustainable funding for our schools, so I ask for a no vote on this amendment. One of the reasons is that when the Budget Committee meets year-round, we'll have more financial forecasts throughout the year. And as you know, during this very budget year, our financial forecast started going downhill after we all left at the end of last session. And these kinds of decisions tie the hands of the Budget Committee. So let's say our financial forecast goes down again this year. That puts us in the situation of not adhering to our statutory reserve. Also, sometimes when we meet during the rest of the year, departments will come forward with emergency situations that we need to address. So the Budget Committee needs to be more flexible in being able to address situations that go on year-round. This is not a sustainable source of funding for K-12. It looks like it is not, and so I ask for a no vote.
Representative Del Grosso.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And this would be money that would be after they did the supplemental process. So if they had to make any adjustments to any of the departments, if they had to do any of that stuff, the money would be there. So this would not tie the hands of the Joint Budget Committee. This is after the supplemental process. And the reality is if there's no money at the end, no money transfers. So it's not like we're transferring money and then we're going to have to cut somewhere else to make this happen. This is just extra money at the end of the year after everything's been balanced. If it's left over, then it diverts into the state education fund. I think this is a great amendment and I urge you all to support it.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Colleagues, I totally agree with what Representative Brown said. I think I totally agree with what Representative Lundin said, but he used those big words and I can't understand him for sure, but I think I did. My concern is, again, the funding of this big portion of our budget. And I understand, Representative Hammond, well, I don't really understand what you all go through on JBC. That's beyond me. And I know that they face all these challenges. But there are three pots that the funding comes from for funding K-12 education. This amendment deals with one of those. Several years ago, there was a sweep that was made of over $1 billion. And we were fat and happy in that state education fund. And we've spent it down and down and down and down and down to where going in the next cycle, we've got $100 million left. If this puts in $500,000 to help raise that fund balance, because the JBC can use each of those three pots to balance the K-12 budget. So it actually becomes a resource for them. And obviously, since it went from 1-point-something billion down to 100 million, it's been helping the budgeting process. So thank you, Representative Brown. If we can get any of that money in after we've done the supplementals, get any more money into that fund, it makes it available to where the JBC can use those three pots to help balance the K-12 budget. I'm all for it, and I urge an aye vote.
Representative Brown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And you know, I guess I think that we do need to tie our hands, and I'm not saying the JBC, but our hands, in that we prioritize K-12 education, that we build up this fund so that we don't have to increase that negative factor. So I would again ask for a yes vote on this amendment. Thank you.
Further discussion on the Brown amendment to the Committee of the Whole report. Seeing none, Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 30 ayes and 35 noes, the Brown amendment to the Committee of the Whole report is lost. The motion before us now is the adoption of the report of the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Oops. I thought I voted. There we go. Close the machine. With 65 ayes and no noes, the report of the Committee of the Whole is adopted. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to proceed out of order for the consideration of Senate Amendment to House Bill 1183.
The motion is to proceed out of order for consideration of Senate amendments to House Bill 1183. See no objection, so ordered. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of House Bill 1183.
House Bill 1183 by Representative Buckner, also Senator Crowder, concerning aligning changes made to the Federal Child Care and Developmental Block Grant Reauthorization of 2014 to the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program.
Representative Buckner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker, I move that the House reject the Senate amendment to House Bill 1183 and that a conference committee be appointed. An amendment was placed on the bill in the Senate that would be detrimental to many participants in the program. I am requesting a conference committee so we can come to an amicable agreement for all involved.
The question before the House is the rejection of the Senate amendments and appointment of a conference committee for House Bill 1183. Is there further discussion? Representative Landgraf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, the amendments that were put on brought this bill into alignment with various counties. We would ask for a yes vote on concurrence. We would ask for concurrence on the amendments.
Yes. So this, do you want that to be in the form of a substitute amendment, Representative Landgraf?
Yes, I would like to substitute a motion that we concur with Senate amendments.
Is that a motion?
Yes, I move that we concur with Senate amendments.
We first have to vote on the substitute, do we not? Amendment? Yes. So the question before us is concurrence as a substitute amendment with House Bill 1183. Is there any discussion? Representative Buckner.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am still asking for a no vote. Thank you.
So the question before us is concurrence with Senate amendments to House Bill 1183. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 30 ayes and 35 noes, concurrence is lost on House Bill 1183. We are now back to the original motion, which is to establish a conference committee on House Bill 1183. Seeing no discussion, Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 35 ayes and 30 noes. A conference committee is formed on House Bill 1183. The members of the conference committee will be Representative Buckner, Representative Primavera, and Representative Brown. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar until tomorrow, April 5th.
The motion is to lay over the balance of the calendar until tomorrow, April 5th. Seeing no objection, so ordered. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until later today at 1:30 p.m.
The motion is to stand in recess until later today at 1:30 p.m. And there are announcements and introductions. So, Representative Ryden.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And members of the State Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, we will convene at 2:15 today so that you may get lunch and be ready for a long afternoon. Thank you. Room
Representative
271.
Vigil.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of the Agriculture, Livestock, Natural Resources Committee will convene at 2:15 today as well. In room 107, we're going to hear the two action-only bills first, and then 1283. So try to be there at 12:15 if possible.
Representative Singer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members of Public Health and Human Services, as well as the rest of the General Assembly, you're invited to join me this afternoon at 4 p.m. for a presentation on how we can use data to protect kids. We'll be in House Committee Room 109 at 4 p.m. Please feel free to join us and bring your thinking caps.
Representative Kagan. Oh, okay. So further announcements and introductions. Seeing none, the motion to recess is back on the floor. Seeing no objections, we're recessed until 1:30. adjourned.